our live stream, and you can see our live posts on Hot News Talk Radio on Facebook. We're now live on YouTube. This is AM 1240 Hot News Talk Radio. This is Binary. We're talking about the Democratic National Convention leaks and how they might actually really affect the presidential election coming up here soon. And also, we've been seeing some interesting discourse, put it that way, some interesting allegations, perhaps, that maybe the Democratic National Convention was hacked by the Russians. And I have no idea if that's true. It seems like that's a narrative that's coming out of left field. That's just sort of there to shake things up. Like, oh, well, it was the Russians. So it sort of discredits the whole leak thing. Because if you think, well, it's a foreign government that we're not exactly 100% friendly with, then maybe it's not exactly true, right? Like that's sort of the thought that I think they're wanting to push into our heads. But regardless of who leaked the information, it doesn't really matter. As long as the information is true, that's all that matters. And it comes from WikiLeaks, and it seems that Julian Assange might have some sort of personal vendetta against Clinton, which wouldn't surprise me, actually, because she was Secretary of State right around the time that Assange was being sought after. So that would make sense that Assange isn't exactly Clinton's biggest fan. But as a result of the 20,000 emails that were released from the Democratic National Committee, sorry, committee, not convention. I've been saying convention this whole time. The Democratic National Committee, Debbie Wasserman Schultz has had to resign, as has a woman named, I think her name was Marcia, I know her last name was Fudge, has had to resign as well. Within the span of, I think, 24 hours, you've had 3 resignations, and then someone named Brazil as well had to resign. So it seems like they replace one corrupt person with yet another corrupt person. Every time they replace someone else comes along who's just as corrupt. There was a case in, I believe, Los Angeles or somewhere in California. I think it was Oakland, actually. I think Oakland is where it was, where there was a police chief who was indicted. And I'm not going to name names because I could be incorrect about this. But there was a police chief who was indicted for having sex with an underage girl, a 15-year-old Hispanic girl. And so obviously he gets ousted by the mayor. And then it comes out that his replacement also did exactly the same thing. And they had to take out like 15 different people in his police department because they were all doing the same evil thing. And I know I'm using a police department as an example. I'm not saying all cops are bad. You know what I'm going on, right? You know what I'm talking about. That's just how it be. But anyway, so that's what's going on with the Democratic National Convention, or committee, I should say. Just days after WikiLeaks released nearly 20,000 emails from the Democratic National Committee, Chairwoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz has resigned. She's one of the more progressive Democrats, by the way, and it's, well, how should we put this? She's not very well favored among more conservative groups. She's pretty powerful in the Democratic Party, being the chairwoman of it and everything, but now she's been moved over to the chair of Clinton's campaign. So, yeah, Debbie Wasserman Schultz and Clinton have got along for a very long time. They're old buddies, so it makes sense that she would put her on. But it seems a little bit interesting that she would have Wasserman Schultz on now as her as part of her campaign when she was just ousted as chairwoman of the DNC for being biased towards Clinton. You know, it sort of smells of corruption, you might say. Well, since the leak, the committee has come under intense criticism over the contents of those emails, which have suggested an organizational bias against the campaign of Senator Bernie Sanders during this year's primary season. Now, this is coming from The Verge, by the way. Wasserman Schultz will step down, and already has stepped down now as chairwoman as soon as the Democratic convention ends. And that's actually not true. She has stepped down already, and so has her successor. So we're now 3 new chairwomen into the Democratic National Convention, committee, and we're only 1 day into the National Convention. The first day is Monday. Wasserman Schultz, by the way, did a little speech at the National Convention, and I think the title of the video was a little bit misleading. The title of the video implied that she was booed off the stage. She really wasn't. There were a lot of people who were in the crowd who were booing her, but saying she was booed off the stage is not really true because she didn't leave as a result of it. So that's a little bit of a misleading statement in the video title. But nonetheless, she was at this keynote speech, I suppose, and this person tries to introduce her. I think he's a senator from Florida, tries to introduce her and say, oh, it's Debbie Wasserman Schultz. And all these people are booing. Not all of them, but a lot of people are booing, and they're holding up these little paper signs that say email. And there are people who seem to be trying to sort of counter protest the protesters who may or may not have been interns or staffers for Wasserman Schultz. I don't know, because that's usually how these things go. But it's a mess. It's chaos now in the Democratic Party. And it's a lot worse than it was in the Republican Party when you had Cruz versus Trump, right? Where you had people who, and you still do have people who are never Trump, yada, yada, who they're never going to vote for Trump and they wouldn't allow Trump to be the nominee. And yet now he is the nominee and he's running for president of the Republican Party. It's not nearly as, that was not nearly as bad as what we have now, I should say. What we have now in the Democratic Party seems to be a lot more divisive than the whole never Trump thing. You have people who were going to vote for Sanders who are just now never going to vote for Clinton. And that makes sense because obviously you should vote your conscience, right? As Cruz was saying, you actually should vote your conscience. But it's amazing to me that there's this just division in the Democratic Party within the span of about a day. It just springs out of nowhere. And I think it has a lot to do with age. Honestly, I think it has a lot to do with age instead of necessarily political leaning, or rather the two sort of go hand in hand. Because in the Democratic Party right now, you have a lot of the old guard, right? Like Wasserman Schultz, like Clinton, like the 90s and 80s Democrats, right? And now you have these young millennials who are also now Democrats, who are sort of the bright-eyed, impressionable kids who are fresh out of college or are still in college, who think the Democratic Party is the most progressive thing ever, and it's going to save the world from the evil nuclear holocaust that the Republican Party is trying to bring about. You know, that's the view of some of these kids. They're wrong, but that's what they view. And it's interesting now because you have this obvious division between these idealistic kids who are voting for Bernie or would vote for Bernie, and you have these idealistic other kids who are voting for Hillary. And now you have sort of millennial against millennial, but the millennials were obviously backing Bernie, not Clinton, so the majority of them. So now you have this very big age-based division in the Democratic Party. It's very interesting. And the DNC leaks are only beginning, by the way. Julian Assange said there's more to come next week. And I'm not sure if he meant by next week, this week, or actually next week, because the timestamp of when he said that's a little weird because he's in Australia. So he could have meant next week or he could have meant this week when he said that. A little bit confusing. But Wasserman Schultz has stepped down as the chairwoman. And earlier this week, WikiLeaks released, or last week, I should say, WikiLeaks released thousands of emails originating from 7 top DNC officials from January 2015 all the way through May of this year. Some of the emails suggest support for Secretary Hillary Clinton as a candidate, with some of the officials discussing tactics for derailing the Sanders campaign. Earlier this year, hackers associated with the Russian government infiltrated DNC systems to steal opposition research on Republican candidate Donald Trump and were able to access private emails and messages. Now, is that where these new emails are coming from? Probably not, actually, because the new emails are from way after that happened. So it's a little bit confusing. Sanders, who recently endorsed Clinton, by the way, renewed his call for Wasserman Schultz to resign from her position at the DNC, something he's done throughout his campaign, actually. However, Sanders has said that he will not rescind his endorsement for Clinton, which doesn't make any sense to me because the woman was obviously very much against you to the point where she seems to have been willing to cheat to get you out of the position. Why would you then back her? Because I guess he's a Democrat, maybe. It's all very confusing, but that's politics today, right? That's just politics today. But it gets better because there is a tech angle to it, actually. Facebook has admitted now that it was actually blocking links to some of those WikiLeaks articles. So, and we know a lot of the big tech industry giants have Democrats in them, right? And normally I don't care that much about political parties. And my eyes have sort of been open to what scumbags a lot of the Democrats are. And don't get me wrong, Republicans are often scumbags too, but in a different way. Because Democrats have this odd way of sort of sticking together and accomplishing goals very nefariously. You know, like liberals tend to really bend the rules because the rules don't suit them. Because liberals and Democrats tend to not really go for a rule-based society because they tend to go for a society that's a lot more subjective, whereas Republicans like to go for a more objective sort of view. And that's despite their republicanism and because of their conservatism. But conservatives really like rules, right? Like we like there to be a certain guideline that you live by. Like for me, it's the word of God is my guideline, right? Like Jesus is my guideline for me. And I know it's for a lot of people here in the South as well and all over the country. And that's the beautiful thing. That's my guideline for life, right? But for a lot of the liberals who are not Christians, especially, the guideline for life is sort of an obscure, vague, non-rule based thing where it's like, well, it depends on the situation. Maybe I'll break the rules here, and it's not really breaking the rules because I'm doing the right thing, and all these little things that it's bending the rules around, and it's very selfish. It's a very selfish view because I can break the rules, but you can't. It's okay when I do it. Well, Facebook has now admitted to blocking WikiLeaks links in a DNC email hack. Facebook admitted on Sunday, according to the New York Post, that it had blocked links to the WikiLeaks trove of emails hacked from the Democratic National Committee. In a Twitter post late Saturday, WikiLeaks accused the social media giant of censorship and gave its followers an online workaround, which is a different link. It's an archive.is link instead of a direct link to WikiLeaks. The WikiLeaks allegation followed a firestorm of controversy that erupted earlier this year when former Facebook workers admitted to routinely suppressing conservative news. Now, something to keep in mind, by the way, when you see news on the right-hand side of your Facebook feed, it's curated. It's not randomly generated or generated based on trends. It's actually curated, from what I understand. And it being curated means someone is picking it, right? Some individual is choosing these news articles. Now, if you've got a particularly liberal kind of guy, he's not going to want to have an article that says, Trump surging and he's probably going to win, something along those lines. Just like me personally, I wouldn't want to read an article about Hillary's probably going to win the election because that's not very interesting to me. And it doesn't really matter that much to me. Who wins the election isn't a big deal to a lot of people. It is to me, but it's not to a lot of people, right? They don't really want to read that sort of thing. So most of the articles that you see that are curated are entertainment based, and they're really just drivel. Like I care about the election, but a lot of other people don't. Most people don't, especially Facebook crowd. It's not really interesting to a lot of people. So the curated news is oftentimes just nonsense about, who's dating who. Taylor Swift is upset about Kim Kardashian, stuff like that no one really cares about. Well, in response to the WikiLeaks charge, another Twitter user, Swift on Security, chimed in that Facebook has an automated system for detecting spam and malicious links that sometimes has false positives, which, if that's the case, that's fine, fix it. And Facebook CSO Alex Stamos does say that it has been fixed, but didn't immediately return a request for comment. But this raises the question, and I'll give Facebook the benefit of the doubt here, but this raises another question. Was WikiLeaks actually blacklisted on purpose, or was it an accident? And did they cover their tracks and say, we fixed it here? There's a lot of weird stuff going on with the Democratic National Committee. There's a lot of odd stuff going on with tech news as well, because Verizon just purchased Yahoo, which means Verizon now owns Tumblr. And Tumblr is sort of the cesspool of the internet. It's where teenagers go and talk about things that are boring and nonsense, like, gender politics. Who cares, right? But the teenagers love to go on Tumblr and talk about that kind of thing. And waste their time with it, I guess. Like, if they put as much thought and energy into talking about how mentally unstable they are, into fixing themselves and being productive, then maybe they would have better lives and wouldn't need to complain nearly as much. And I say that as someone who has gone through some stuff mentally, right? Like, I'm not a perfect individual by any stretch of the imagination, but I also recognize that one of the only people who can help me is myself, right? I don't get the whole mentality of, you feel so bad for myself and other people should be feeling bad for me too. And look at how bad my problems are. And you should feel bad for me and donate money to me on my Indiegogo so I can buy lunch instead of me getting a job and stuff. And I live with my parents because I can't get a job and yada, yada. A lot of us are in that situation, but complaining about it on Tumblr to get, hug box points isn't going to fix your situation at all. It's not. It's just going to garner this, like I say, a hug box. It's going to garner a environment around you where people say, well, it's okay to not fix yourself, and it's okay to be completely messed up in the head and not bother trying to have any sort of self-improvement. Like, like now people are convinced that it's okay to be morbidly obese. It's not. It's not healthy. And you have this whole healthy at every size movement. It's not healthy. You are morbidly obese if you are this particular weight at this particular height. You are actually damaging your organs by doing that. No such thing as healthy at every size, I guarantee you. Ask any doctor with a actual medical license that doesn't come from, Joe Schmo's doctor college. Because I guarantee you he'll say, wow, you are morbidly obese. Here's a diet plan I put together for you. It's ridiculous. So Tumblr is a cesspool of the internet, and now Verizon owns it, so maybe they can milk some money out of these dumb teenagers. I don't know. This is Binary here on Hot News Talk Radio, AM 1240, and hotnewstalkradio.com. Check us out on Facebook and streaming live on YouTube as well. That's YouTube, Hot News Talk Radio on YouTube.
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world. News Talk 1240.
They're soaring worldwide. Prices for gold and silver are soaring worldwide. Rick Davis wants you to take advantage of them. Go to Rick Davis right now. Rick Davis Gold and Silver and get yours today. Your cash, and more cash. Go ahead, take advantage of them. Gold is soaring past $1,350 an ounce. That's $1,350 an ounce. Silver is out of this world too. Buy and sell at Rick Davis Gold and Diamonds. Gold, silver, jewelry, rings, watches. Rick Davis has got what you want. Right on. Cash, and more cash. Rick Davis has got so much cash it's as tall as a billboard. And he wants to stuff it in your pocket. Cash, and more cash. Yours for the asking. Come on in today and watch metals rise up as high as Rick's billboard. Rick Davis Gold and Diamond, 5301 Brainerd Road. You know where it is. Come get your cash, and more cash.
Rubber's tough, but foam rubber is soft. Foam rubber is the star at Stuff It Upholstery, which uses it to revive your couch, your embarrassing easy chair, your boat seat cushions. Stuff It Foam Rubber in Hickson covers Chattanooga and surrounding areas. Don't throw out that favorite easy chair that's grown haggard and barbaric. New life for your seat cushions. Premium auto-grade rubber foam for your restaurant, church, or business. Stuff It Upholstery brings comfort and relief. Go ahead, skid away from flat, dull, and droopy cushions. Relax, restore, revive. When comfort matters, stuff it. 4608 Hickson Pike, 877-1616. Ask for Larry. That's 877-1616.
On your signature, you can get $150,000. Can you believe that? $150,000 on your signature. Hi, I'm Bruce Krebs with the Entrepreneur Source. There's a program right now that you can get $150,000 on your signature with no pledge of collateral or personal guarantee. Call me at 423-875-5621 to learn more. 423-875-5621. You've been thinking about starting a business? Don't do it on your own. I have a proven track record for the last 13 years, a 96% success rate. I can guide you into a franchise where you will pay yourself through the startup phase with very low or little risk. Call me now. I'm Bruce Krebs at 423-875-5621. And make sure to listen to the Entrepreneur Hour every other Wednesday from 11 to 12 o'clock. Call me now, 875-5621.
I'm blowing everything up. We're starting over. I'm doing a new show. I want guys who push it to the middle of the table and go over the top. Take a risk, fail miserably. I'm right, and I'm not wrong, and I'll never back down. Conflict works. Allow it.
It's The Herd with Colin Cowherd. Right here and everywhere. Noon Eastern.
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world. News Talk 1240.
Hot 1240 Hot News Talk Radio with your Hot News Now update. A mental patient who escaped from Moccasin Bend was captured after his hunger got the better of him. In Grundy County, officers responded to a call at McDonald's after a person said someone had stolen their order right off of the counter. Deputies then found the man who had escaped, Brandon Robinson, at that McDonald's. He was arrested and is transported back to the Bedford County Jail. He was an inmate at the Moccasin Bend Mental Hospital. He escaped on Saturday. A Hickson man's now behind bars after the police say he sent both faxes and emails containing threatening messages to Judge Lila Statham. Detectives say the fax messages were strange at first, but didn't contain any direct threats until later on, when they said that they were going to kill Judge Statham and that they had a courthouse bomb. Eventually, the suspect was found and arrested. There's going to be a sales tax holiday this weekend for you to buy school supplies under $100, clothing under $100, and computers under $1,500 this weekend. If it's going on the Tennessee Valley, it's going on Hot 1240 Hot News Talk Radio.
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
News Talk 1240.
Expect very hot and humid weather out there through the afternoon. Could see a stray shower storm, but not many. Highs upper 90s tonight, lows near 74. For Tuesday, a few isolated afternoon storms, still quite hot, mid-90s with scattered showers and storms a little more likely for the midweek. Dr. Rod Phillips has released the most important book he's ever written, The Unraveling of America. He pulls back the curtain and exposes those who are pulling the strings and unraveling the fabric of America. Available at Amazon or ronphillips.org. And I'm Sheen 12 Chief Meteorologist Patrick Cole.
On AM 1240, Hot News Talk Radio.
Well, it's one of the largest purchases of our time, $4.8 billion. It's official. Yahoo has been bought by Verizon for $4.8 billion. That's a bit of change, isn't it? $4.8 billion now for the purchase of Yahoo. And I'm not sure why exactly they would pay that much for it, because I wouldn't give you 50 cents for Yahoo, but whatever. Verizon has confirmed earlier reports that it has bought ailing internet pioneer Yahoo in an all-cash deal, meaning there's no stock transfer, none of that stuff. It's all cash. I mean, there is stock transfer, obviously, but they didn't do, we'll buy 50% stock and 50% cash. No, they bought it with cash outright. The sale does not include Yahoo's shares in Alibaba, Verizon says. Yahoo's Japan shares, its non-core patents, and minority investments that are all set to be cut loose from the planned takeover. Those assets will form part of a newly publicly traded company that will be spun out of Yahoo as a separate business. It's unclear who's going to be heading that firm, however. And again, this is one of the larger tech deals of our time. Verizon CEO Lowell Adams said just over a year ago, we acquired AOL to enhance our strategy of providing a cross-screen connection for our consumers, creators, and advertisers. The acquisition of Yahoo will put Verizon in a highly competitive position as a top global mobile media company and help accelerate our revenue stream in digital advertising. Well, it might make the Tumblr app work a little bit better, maybe. Because I don't know, whenever I use it, it crashes really badly. I make fun of Tumblr all the time, but I've actually got some content up on there. It's not good, but I've got some stuff on there. And Tumblr app just always crashes for me. I'm not sure why. It's like a memory problem. I don't know. But Yahoo will be thrown into the mix with Yahoo, also a faded internet star that burned brightly in the 90s, which really shows the fickleness of the .com market, right? The former .com market, I suppose, the internet market. Really is a fickle thing. Things that were the hot commodity 10 years ago are now completely forgotten. No one cares about them, right? Like Google's managed to maintain its status. But think about this. In the early 2000s, Ask Jeeves was a viable competitor to Google. Remember Ask Jeeves? And then it became Ask.com, and it actually had internet. It actually had advertisements on TV for Ask Jeeves and Ask.com. No one uses that anymore. Google is the top. Google is the best one out of any of those search engines, and I think I figured out why. Google was run by young, hip kids. It was run by cool people, fresh out of college, maybe barely graduated college, maybe didn't graduate college at all, like myself. I never even went to college. I didn't need to. I got into the field I wanted to get into without actually bothering with the whole school thing. And it turned out pretty well for me, actually, believe it or not. While I'm not in college and working on my career, most of my friends are in college and hate every second of it. So go figure. But I'm much better off for it. But no, think about that. There's all these different companies that just don't mean anything to anyone anymore. Like AOL doesn't really mean much to a lot of people now. AOL is a good multimedia company. It owns a lot of different websites that are good. I think it owned Joystick for a while. That was a cool website. I believe AOL owns TechCrunch, and there are probably a few other assets AOL has that I don't know about. Yahoo is actually pretty popular with the news. Yahoo News is very popular. Yahoo Sports is extremely popular. We have it here on Hot News Talk Radio on the weekends. So Yahoo Sports is very popular, owned by Verizon now. There's all sorts of little multimedia ventures that Yahoo branched out to make sure it still made money, which is why it's worth $4.5 billion. It's an interesting business, but it's been purchased by Verizon now, and I'm not sure how I think about that. Now, granted, any business can purchase any other business. I don't care. But it's an interesting choice for Verizon to do, because Verizon's been really trying to be that company that kids think is a hip company, right? Like, kids think that Verizon's a hip company, but they're not going to. Is the problem with the strategy. There's not really a hip company when it comes to cell providers. I can't think of one that I think is a really cool and hip company. I've got a subcontractor. I use Ultra Mobile, which is a subcontractor of T-Mobile. So my cell towers and everything are all T-Mobile. I can use any cell tower that T-Mobile uses, and it works fine for me, except for in rural areas. Like when, we're in Chattanooga, so when you go out into the sticks, it doesn't really work too well. My cell signal dies, and then there are friends of mine who have AT&T, and their cell signal's fine. So it's just one of those things. Most people who have iPhones seem to be on either Verizon or AT&T, and T-Mobile just sort of gets left out. It seems to be more the Android carrier, and I'm honestly okay with that. T-Mobile seems to be great. The data plans are pretty amazing, but and I'm not advertising for T-Mobile by any stretch of the imagination. In fact, Verizon advertises here, so I'm not really biased towards any carrier. If there's one that's cheap and I like, I'll buy it. And that tends to be my thing with most things. I'm not very brand loyal at all. If there's something that's cheap and I like, I'll buy it. And if it's something that's expensive and is not cool to me, I won't buy it. Okay, prime example. I was talking to my friends about this brand loyalty thing, and it kind of got me interested in the subject. Ozark Trail is a Walmart company, and it produces all sorts of different things. It's got, and I'm not advertising for them by any means. I'm just giving you an example, right? Like Ozark Trail has vacuum insulated cups, right? Vacuum insulated mugs, and it has knives, camping equipment. I've bought a canteen from them before, right? Now, on the subject of vacuum insulated cups, Yeti is like the brand that the kids want, right? Like Yeti is the cool brand that all the cool kids want. And I got for Christmas a Yeti vacuum insulated mug, and it's actually really cool. It keeps things hot and it keeps things cold, and I couldn't really ask for anything more. But it's like $40, and it's a 20-ounce thing, and I like it. I'm not saying it's a bad gift. I asked for it. It's a good thing. But it really makes you wonder, is it any better than the cheaper one? Or is it just the brand name? It's kind of like Apple stuff, where like Apple's really, it's more brand name than it is actual functionality. Like most of the people who use an Apple computer could probably use a Windows computer just as fine. It's just Apple computers have this like social stigma about them. Like you buy an Apple computer and you're buying the cool hip computer. Like if I have a ThinkPad, no one thinks that that's particularly cool except for people like me who like ThinkPads. I love ThinkPads. I think they're cool laptops, but people want MacBooks. It's just a brand loyalty thing. It's kind of weird. I'm not very brand loyal to many brands. I think Steam, Valve Corporation is the best game provider ever. But I have an Xbox. I mean, it's not like I will never buy anything that's not Steam. And that's really how modern economy is. The internet has changed how we think about brand loyalty, where there's no such thing as brand loyalty, especially with websites, right? Like I won't get my news from X website, but I will get my news from CBS.com. No one is like that, especially when you use a news aggregate like Google News. You're getting your news from all over the place, from sources that you might not have even heard of, right? Like you've got news from Breitbart, and you're getting news from AOL.com, from Yahoo News, from Washington Post, New York Times, Chicago Sun-Times. Name any. Whoa! I knocked over a water bottle. Name any website ever, and Google News has it documented there on Google News. I just smacked one of these plastic water bottles off the desk. By the way, we got hundreds of them here. Name any news website, and Google News has it aggregated there. So there's no such thing anymore as brand loyalty. But anyway, back to the topic at hand. Verizon CEO Lowell Adams says that just over a year ago, we acquired AOL to enhance our strategy of providing a cross-screen connection for our consumers, creators, and advertisers. The acquisition of Yahoo will put Verizon in a highly competitive position as a top global mobile media company and help accelerate our revenue stream in digital advertising. So Yahoo, a long time ago, maybe a year ago, bought a website called Tumblr. And Tumblr is a very popular website with young teenage girls and some young teenage boys, but mostly teenage girls. They use it to share jokes, I guess. It's not particularly funny, but they use it to share like fashion, political views, newspaper clippings. It's kind of like Pinterest, but for younger people. Like Pinterest is mostly for late 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s moms, and Tumblr is like for the crowd that hasn't gotten to Pinterest yet. It seems like a lot of the time. So Tumblr is really for the hip young kids. There's a lot of music on there. There's a lot of fashion on there. There's a lot of politics for some reason on there. It's where a lot of this like gender stuff came up out of nowhere. Like suddenly we care about polygender, non-binary people out of nowhere. That's mostly where that came from. It's Tumblr. It really is a cesspit in a lot of regards. I still use it, but it really is a cesspit. And so now Yahoo owns that. Or sorry, so now Verizon owns that. I'm very interested to see how that's going to work out for Verizon, how they're going to try to make that more marketable. And by the way, the reason, and this is going to hurt a lot of people who use Tumblr, but the reason Yahoo bought Tumblr was so that it could analyze the photos that people are uploading to Tumblr to try to recognize brands and then use targeted advertising to try to sell to the kids who had these brands. I'm not joking. That actually is why it was bought. And Verizon is undoubtedly buying Yahoo to acquire some of that information and some of that data and some of that infrastructure. That's a huge marketing tool for any company, and Verizon can use all the huge marketing tools they can use. So that's probably a big, big factor in the purchase of Tumblr and Yahoo. So very interesting stuff out of Verizon. And most people don't know about that, by the way, but that actually is why it was purchased. China, be glad you don't live in China, by the way. And by China, I mean the People's Republic of China, not the Republic of China, a.k.a. Taiwan, and not Hong Kong, a.k.a. the part of China that's not actually part of China. China, mainland China. Be glad you don't live there. China's top internet regulator, according to Bloomberg, ordered major online companies, including Sina Corp and Tencent Holdings Ltd. Limited, to stop original news reporting. Stop it. The latest effort by the government to tighten its grip over the country's web and information industries. The Cyberspace Administration of China, cool name, imposed the ban on several major news portals, including Sohu.com Incorporated and NetEase Incorporated. Chinese media reported in identically worded articles, citing an unidentified official from the agency's Beijing office. The companies have seriously violated internet regulations by carrying plenty of news content obtained through original reporting, causing huge negative effects, according to a report that appeared in the paper on Sunday. The agency instructed the operators of mobile and internet news services to dismantle current affairs news operations on Friday, after earlier calling a halt to such activity on Tencent, according to people familiar with the situation. So be glad you don't live in China, because in China, you're not allowed to actually report on the news. You can only parrot what the government tells you to say. So sometimes, we complain about how things are right now in the U.S., and they are pretty bad sometimes. But things are, believe it or not, getting a lot better, because with the advent of the internet, with the advent of online reporting, of the advent of anyone possibly being a reporter, things have changed a lot. Things have changed to a huge degree in terms of who can report what, because we've gotten great news, we've gotten great sources out of people on the ground with their cell phone. Think about this. Think about how in the U.S., right, we see videos of, say, just as an example, police brutality, right? And without a citizen with a phone, we wouldn't have even known that it would have happened, right? Like without a citizen with a phone, we would have only heard the official story, and there would be no backlash whatsoever, and the cop would still be on the street, right? You see that kind of thing all the time. Or maybe there's a video of a car crash that helps the police to determine who's at fault. That's good stuff too. Or maybe there's a video shot covertly by some staffer that shows a politician saying something racist, right? Now that's something that's hot and juicy for the presses, right? We love that kind of thing. And it's people with cell phones, people shooting video, who give us those opportunities, who allow us to report on these things that are really very interesting. People with cell phones are a lot more important than they get credit for, right? Like the average person who's willing to point their cell phone at something dangerous happening is a very important person, whether they realize it or not. That person is doing something that is a very important task, that is keeping the public informed. And perhaps they're not doing it out of a sense of duty in terms of keeping the public informed. Maybe they're doing it so that they can get, internet brownie points for filming something scary, so they can get views and money and get asked to be interviewed by Good Morning America, and that's fine. But the end result is still the same. They've filmed something interesting. They've shot interesting video on their phone, and now we get to see it. It's another part of the world that we get to see. The availability of the camera, the availability of the cell phone has led to so many interesting things, has led to so much truth getting out, that its value cannot be underestimated. It should not be underestimated, and really its value couldn't even be overestimated because it's so valuable. It's ridiculous. Think about video that we got out of Turkey, right? When the coup was going on, and might even still be going on in Turkey, we got amazing citizen footage of just people shooting things. Both figuratively and literally, people shooting video, and then you see videos of soldiers shooting up in the air trying to get protesters off of their tanks. You see a helicopter firing at a crowd. All sorts of just amazing footage comes out of Turkey, and it wouldn't happen without the cell phone, without the small video camera that's on everyone's cell phone and has been since 2007. It's amazing technology. And speaking of 2007, by the way, this is something interesting. Next year, believe it or not, next year will be the 10-year anniversary of the iPhone. Wow, right? 10 years of iPhone. And maybe Apple will come out with an interesting phone to celebrate the occasion. I doubt it, but maybe they will. 10 years of iPhone as of 2017. Another odd thing that's going to be happening this year is 15 years since 9/11 is 2016. Can you believe that? September the 11th of this year will be 15 years since 9/11. Way to make me feel old, right? 15 years since 9/11. Can you believe it's been that long? It doesn't feel like it. It didn't feel that way when it was the 1-year anniversary of July 16th. It didn't feel that way. It felt a lot more, I don't know, it felt a lot more present than that. I don't know. But getting back to the Democratic National Convention and the DNC discussion that's going on, Clinton is talking right now in Charlotte, North Carolina. She's not really saying much of anything about the email leaks right now. I don't have audio of it, unfortunately. But she's talking about terrorism, general presidential election stuff. That's fine. But the DNC email leaks have really not been in the press nearly as much as I expected them to be. For instance, Ars Technica is a good website, I think, a lot of the time. It publishes good news. There's a lot of good tech articles on there, but it didn't really talk at all about the email leaks out of the Democratic National Committee, and that seemed very odd to me. I didn't understand why. It just seemed odd. But another thing that's coming out of the Democratic National Committee leaks is something that's, again, not being talked about very much, which is someone, and I'm going to be vague here because I don't want to be libelous or anything, but someone in the Democratic National Committee was asking for sort of a head start on an article that a Politico editor was writing, so they could potentially read it and make sure there wasn't anything damaging in it to the Clinton campaign. Now, that breaks every journalistic ethical rule ever on the planet, but unfortunately, it seems to have happened. And hopefully, whoever asked for that article and whoever wrote that article are both fired, because you should not hold a position and give your articles to political candidates ahead of time. That is not how journalism works. It's not how it should ever work. And you should be fired if you do that. If there was someone on my staff who did that, I would fire them without thinking twice about it, even if I like them personally. If you give an article that you're writing ahead of time to a political candidate who you're writing about, you're fired. That's it. End of story. End of discussion. You're out of here. That does not happen. There is no excuse for that ever under any circumstances. Should you ever do that? Never. Fired. So hopefully that Politico editor gets fired, and hopefully whoever requested that email gets fired as well, because he shouldn't even be asking, honestly. I understand doing it because you're a weasel, but doing it is certainly not an ethical thing. And I never expect Democrats to be ethical. I never expect Republicans to be ethical either. I never expect I never expect politicians to be ethical under any circumstances. It's just beyond all expectation. We know Clinton is not a particularly ethical kind of person. We know that that Trump sometimes may not seem to be very ethical. Sanders, oddly enough, seemed to be pretty ethical sometimes, and I'm not a fan of his at all. But Sanders seemed to have run his campaign in a pretty ethical way, to his credit. But it's just a mess. American politics are a complete shambles, complete mess. And this year, this election might be one of the most important elections that we've had in a long time. I've heard people say that it's just as important as when Lincoln was elected. And that might actually be true. There's a lot of division in our country right now, and it's only deepening now with the Democratic Party falling apart. The Republican Party now fighting against itself. Both parties seem to want to split in two, and I would be okay with that. If the Republican Party split into, say, the Conservative Party and the Progressive Republican Party, I'd be fine with that. If the Democratic Party split into the Democratic Party and the Progressive Party, I'd be okay with that, because at least we'd know maybe who we're voting for. You'd have a better idea of what their political views are, because Republican and Democrat is too broad. You have Republicans like Rand Paul and Ron Paul, and then you have Republicans like John McCain. They're almost polar opposites, right? You've got Democrats like Jim Webb, who seems like an all right guy, and you've got Democrats like Charlie Rangel. It's complete polar opposites, and I know they're both veterans, but still, it's messed up. American politics are a shambles. They need to be fixed, and maybe they'll actually be fixed, believe it or not. This is Binary here on Hot News Talk Radio. Colin Cowherd up next, the best sports radio talk show next to Clutch Keon Rose is on at 6. This is Binary.
News Talk 1240 AM 1240 Hot News Talk Radio with your chance to win $100